Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze is a very politically radical work of fiction. It's revolutionary fiction. You know, how do you change the world and what does it get to on the other side? So that's the real thing it's focused on, but the manner in which it achieves that is different from other politically radical works of fiction and revolution, especially like Westerns that are life on the frontier and how do you found society in the face of open violence and a strong man, hyper-capitalist who, you know, voraciously wants to take everything for himself. You know, how do you resist that and found a different life on the other side of that? So that's the overall struggle of Roadhouse, and it gets to something unique, but the thing we have to really look at is how do we get there? It's not just about this unique thing that we achieve at the end of it, but like what are all of the steps that are necessary to get to that point? That's what's really worth digging through on Roadhouse. There's already a great discussion on Roadhouse with Todd McGowan and Ryan Engley's Why Theory podcast, the Radical Western episode 136, I believe. But this idea is Todd McGowan's, this whole idea of the radicality of Roadhouse itself. But I want to dig deeper into the foundations that allow for Roadhouse to be radical. Revolutionary fiction is the most important fiction to be looking closely at right now, and so it's a theme of this channel. And it extends to the post-apocalypse as well, where we are facing the undone state of the world and the radical violence that's contingent upon existence without a social body to keep things, you know, running neatly around you and give you the freedom of relaxing on Sunday morning. But you know, how do you undergo that violence, the need to be violent yourself, and change the world? Found a new way in which things can be. And I really appreciate you watching the whole video and liking and subscribing. And the radicality is simply that the revolution that happens, like the founding violence that's necessary in order to create a new world, typically has to oust the person who is violent, the violent act itself, from its foundations mythically, like, you know, throw it into this past, this murky past, in order to have this society of this idea of a harmonious whole society, basically, that isn't bothered by the antagonisms that defined it previously. So this is the territory of The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and Shane in particular, where you're dealing with Westerns that are lives on the frontier, and how do you found law? How do you resist a cattleman who wants to push you off your land? And, you know, the society you're currently in is fully defined by this primal father Jewissor, this person who enjoys fully and, you know, like a mob boss, takes everything for himself. So how do you change what's unchangeable? Like the world, what defines the world is how that person is the one in control. So how do you not just resist their force, but change the fabric of the world itself? And how do you mobilize not just yourself, but the others around you in order to resist this point? With Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and with Shane, we have that mobilization happen of a people who's not mobilizable, but the main focal point of the violence, when push comes to shove, has to fall on someone who has to go off into the sunset one way or another. You have to, you know, keep him out of the promised land like Moses. That's the way law typically is seen to function. The founding violence of law itself has to be put into the past, because if it's not, then the violence of the law in its operation and, you know, trials and whatnot, or policing, it becomes invalid. It becomes just an exercise of power, and it doesn't operate under the oughts of law, you know, the nice, clean order of things. But the unique thing about Roadhouse is we have our cake and eat it too. We have our revolution, we achieve the impossible, but Dalton is able to enjoy the fruits of his labor and enjoy the roadhouse that he revolutionized and made into a proper roadhouse again. So, you know, how did we get to that world? A world in which, you know, everyone really is included. We don't have to just oust it onto a scapegoat figure. So there's a very unique insistence on the way things can be with Shane and Liberty Valance, where we're insisting that the world can change and we're not just going to go along with the flow of things. But with Roadhouse, Dalton is a unique figure. He is a warrior monk, basically, a philosopher of effectively Stoicism and Zen Buddhism, but who he finds himself lucky to be a bouncer in the world. And that's the really important thing to focus on, how his being a bouncer is his involvement with the world, his connection to it. And he's not just occupying his space in life from this phantasmatic detachment. That's the danger of Stoicism and Zen Buddhism. The realization that we get with those philosophies is how desire, you know, is a lure. It doesn't give us what we think we're getting out of it. When we desire an object, we get it, it putrefies. We need to keep replacing it with other objects. So, I mean, that's how capitalism works. The lure of achievement, whether it's material or through prestige or through your career or whatever, like that rat race is what Zen Buddhism and Stoicism step us back from. But the danger with Stoicism and Zen Buddhism is when we make that void into a fetish, a screen to hold off symbolic castration, the undone state of the world, the way in which we put off the burden of having to be open to what's undoing about life itself, life with other people, like what's difficult about love, our own freedom, ethics, like all of these traumatic burdens. If we focus on the void and make it into its own fantasized object, it becomes a screen from confronting all of this. But nicely, that's not the case with Dalton. His involvement is what's really interesting here, but his involvement is made possible by certain radical detachments from material objects. He gives up the first car he has to the one person who's not white, and I think the whole film. And then he buys another that gets beaten up immediately, and he laughs it off. He stays in a barn paying next to nothing, but that barn is, very importantly, overlooking the mansion of Brad Wesley, who is the gang boss, capitalist, wealthy man, who's the source of this whole town's problems. So the person who's got his fingers in everything and says, no, the Roadhouse must be this brutally excessive place that I'm raking in money off of personally. So we're finding the right point to break away from this from within it. So Dalton gets involved. He's an outsider who comes into town to change things. But he gets immediately involved, even though he's got the ability to leave at any time. He's not there for the money. He's there for cause. And so when Dalton arrives at the Double Deuce Road House to clean it up, he starts cleaning it up with his radical insistence on this is the way things can be. And of course, that touches on the one thing it's not supposed to touch on, the person you're not supposed to fire, who's part of the mob. And the mob comes to make a problem that he keeps resisting. And this develops a dynamic of this dialectical lover's quarrel, where they keep getting into these excessive bar fights that keep escalating, but it's done from this state of love, this state of desire of the other person that gets very sexual as things progress. And it's this "don't you love me" sort of thing, that message that's being said by the bad guys. That's basically the obscene underside laid bare. That's the funny obscenity of Roadhouse itself, with all of its huge excesses. It's just laying bare the unstated excesses that we fall into to be part of a I guess you'd call it a mobilized society, like a society that's geared towards something. And here in that case, that something is the brawling and the excesses of what goes on at a roadhouse. But it's very similar to military engagement, where we've put away, being tied to the couple who's separate from the world. We give over ourselves erotically to the social group that binds us. So there are erotic expressions of fraternity that keep getting expressed to keep us bound, in lieu of having a family unit that keeps us bound to things. So the family unit itself in this organization likewise gets sucked into it. It's not a point of departure, not a point of radical departure. That's why Dalton has to be Stoic and Zen Buddhist, basically, with his stance to actually change things. It's taking that firm stance. But the tricky thing to focus on isn't so much what goes on with the bad guys, but with the two couples that Dalton forms. He is with two people while he's endeavoring with this revolution of his, this attempt to take a social body that is apolitical or unmobilizable and make it mobilized, which is the same stuff of the Fallout show season 2 with Maximus and Freeside, how he revolutionizes a post-apocalyptic social body that is not mobilizable, that has no attachment even to their own skin, as they're watching him fight a bunch of Deathclaws, and their own lives are threatened, but they can't be mobilized into defending their town, right? So it's, with Maximus, it's clinging to the fantasy that mobilizes them and gives them, that it rouses them into becoming full subjects, makes them into full people, basically, who can make a stand and who can actually confront what's undoing about the world around them, take the right action. here with Roadhouse, the fantasy isn't Dalton's. He's just that radical insistence on the way in which things can be otherwise. But the fantasy that's getting mobilized is that of the local town people, starting with the owner of the Roadhouse, who just fantasizes about having a proper roadhouse, but we see the way in which it extends to all the other small business owners of the town. So we're mobilizing that fantasy for them, helping them get the right grounding to engage that. But Dalton's real stance is split. That's what's really interesting here. He's divided between two couples that he forms. One with the local town doctor, and one with his best friend Wade, who's a fellow bouncer who gets involved too. With Wade, it's pretty simple, because it's the revolutionary couple, the couple that is able to face what's undoing about the world and sacrifice each other in their commitment to each other. That's a very radical and foundational form of love, incredibly important. So while they're endeavoring on this huge revolution together, the only message of Wade is, we can step out of this. We do have the freedom to just go on to another town when things are getting too hot. And, seeing that through is what leads to the movie's radical conclusion where Wade is murdered, and that is what sends us off the deep end into a killing spree. But the local doctor is a unique case because she's an expert. She's a cold functionary of society, and she's agnostic towards who's in charge. Not in a I'm a nurse here to help whoever needs help kind of way, but really as an expert. So she is a force against the revolution that Dalton's actually achieving. But she's his point of attachment. They have a love scene that's explicit, and that's important to break us away from just the disavowal of everything entirely. We have to form a world. So she's offering the world on the other side of things. However, she's not, she doesn't care honestly about anything but her love of Dalton. So it's like a private thing. She doesn't care about engaging the world around them. And her warning is, as Dalton gets embroiled in the violence and has to be violent himself, and is violent himself, she holds the mirror up to him to say that, how do you break out of this revolutionary violence? How do you change meaningfully from the person you're trying to overthrow when you're just using violence, and you'll just keep using this violence if you win to whatever enemy comes along. It's not going to be a change. It's going to just be you at the top. And so while the bad guys are reacting hysterically towards Dalton, who is, the man, there's this running joke in the movie of Dalton not being actually a big guy, even though he's got a big legend around him. People engage him phantasmatically as much larger than he is, because he is much larger than he is. He's a huge radical force that is changing the world. But the bad guys are hysteric in the face of him, and they keep asking, like, what do you want? What do you want? So they keep escalating their violence the way a child would lash out at their father to pin down their father's desire. They're doing the same thing with Dalton. And as things escalate, of course, the fighting gets to be lethal, and Dalton uses his, again, very phantasmatic kung fu type move of ripping out the throat of the top goon who's trying to murder him. And, that's like taking the precious thing, the precious core of someone that gives them life, and having access to it, penetrating it, ripping it out, etc. So, that's, again, a very fantasy way of engaging violence, of getting to desire and trying to struggle with the fact of desire, your own and other people's. And so the doctor turns her back on Dalton, and the bad guys, in response, play a flipping coin game to decide which of Dalton's two coupled pairs are they going to murder as a tit for tat, and they end up murdering Wade. And that sends Dalton on a rampage of the compound, and he unalives basically everyone, but he gets to the point of confronting the bad guy in charge, and the bad guy in charge is just saying, isn't this what you wanted? Isn't this what you wanted? And so we get to that final standoff, and Dalton gets the upper hand, and he's ready to land that Hollywood final blow. Does he do it? Does he not? And he holds back. Too bad for all of the goons who he didn't hold back from unaliving to get to that point. as is also his standard. But his holding back allows for the town small business owners who've been abused by the bad guy to each take their turn shooting him as he's trying to resist, of course. But they're the ones who take on the violence themselves, shoot him together like a firing squad. He falls down dead, and the police show up, and they instantly say, "I didn't see anything, did you?" And of course, the one goon who's left also likewise says, "I didn't see anything, did you?" too. So he's part of it as well. This new world that's been ushered in by overthrowing the primal father of Wesley. So that's what instantly founds the myth. The I don't know. It's the same with like Liberty Valance and whatnot. You instantly forget how you got to that point because you're in a new world. There is no looking back, literally. And then we have the play of the proper type of excesses of being at the Double Deuce Road House, the standard ones, and a standard heterosexual couple, no longer homoerotically bound together by the violence of the constant bar fights. The thing that I find unsettling is the real love wasn't really of the doctor nearly so much as it is of Wade, the person who's just as committed to cause as you are. The revolutionary couple is more radical than loving an expert. There's a cold functionary aspect to the world now, and the unique thing too is this is on a frontier. This is a town that's basically a Wild West, but it's all functioning within capitalism itself, within society. It's not an actual frontier. So setting things right means something different. So you have to have Dalton be involved. There is no horizon for him to wander off into, really. Though you could also imagine, him working somewhere else, etc. But the point is, he does make his home. He is involved. So the clear message of Roadhouse is you need that revolutionary couple, but you need to, let one of the two die to get to the new world, the new way in which things can be, where you can now be coupled up with an expert. And while the differences in sex here, I don't think are essential to the positions themselves. I think you could switch the sexes around, no problem. But the homosocial bond of the bar fighting, that has to be put to an end in order to have the fraternity of a normal bar house where you can have your doctors there alongside you at the bar, basically. So the real enigma we're left with isn't so much how do we get to this revolution of Roadhouse where the little guy has risen up and collectively taken responsibility for changing his own world. It's which side of the couple are we on? Is it the revolutionary couple or the expert couple? I'm always going to side on the revolutionary couple. That's a more radical form of love that is open to the undone state of the world. And, in Roadhouse, the revolutionary couple, first off, it's foreclosed erotically, or, officially, let's just say it like that. But, in Roadhouse, there's a dialectics where you have to squash the revolutionary couple to get to this expert couple in a stabilized world. But the revolutionary couple is a state of openness that the expert is closed off from. I don't think we should be so enjoying of our romance with the doctor as we are with the loss of Wade. I think the loss of Wade is tragic, even if you could view it as a that's the way the cookie crumbles, dude, kind of stoicism. There is more at work in maintaining the revolutionary couple in the state of revolution as things move on forward. I don't think giving us the doctor figure, the expert figure, as this stable, this is the way things should be, is the thing to hold on to. But I just write zombie apocalypses, right?